It's just blowing my mind, this 50-year plot to basically legalize corruption in the United States that started with the Powell memo in large part. And so I wanted to get you back on. I wanted to give it another plug because I think that this is something people really need to know about. And so give us an overview of this the master plan, right? Tell it, what is it?
So the master plan really starts in about 50 years ago when the government was much more democratically responsive to what the population wanted. This is an era back in the late 60s, early 70s, where the government is doing things like creating Medicare, Medicaid, the Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act, creating the EPA, the Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act, declaring a war on poverty. And all of this had the corporate types extremely freaked out. And along came Lewis Powell. Lewis Powell was the head of the American Bar Association, a tobacco industry lawyer, who encapsulated all of the corporate angst about what was going on in the country in this memo that he wrote to the Chamber of Commerce, basically saying, hey, we, the business community, the elites, the oligarchs, corporate power, we have a crisis on our hands. We are losing control of the government. The government is encroaching on the so-called free enterprise system, and we have to fight back. And one of the things that they focused on in the memo was taking over the judiciary, the least democratic part of our government, small d democratic, the most permanent part of our government in the sense of lifetime appointments, the least accountable part of our government. And there was also a focus on campaign finance. The idea being that if the population is wanting things you, a small elite, don't want, what you can do to fight back is try to win control of the least democratic part of the government. And one of the ways you do that is to deregulate the campaign finance system that makes it easier for you to ultimately get the politicians in office who will put the judges in office. So out of that plan comes very soon after that the radical idea, that money equals speech gets enshrined by the Supreme Court of the time. And that case is pushed by some of the groups that came out of the organizing, the corporate organizing around the Powell memo. And soon after the Buckley v. Vallejo case, saying money is speech in elections, Lewis Powell himself gets on the Supreme Court and uses that ruling to work behind the scenes to engineer another ruling called the Bellotti decision, which then extends those free speech rights, those constitutionally protected free speech rights to spend in elections, extends those rights to corporations, which becomes the building block, really the foundation for ultimately what became the Citizens United ruling. Now, there's a lot of history that happens in between that time, but that's the basic idea. To take over the government, for corporations and oligarchs to take over the government, they have to deregulate the campaign finance system and effectively legalize corruption.
Yeah, and it's an extraordinary story, and you tell it brilliantly on the podcast, with all kinds of clips from people back in the day. One of the things I thought was just hysterical, I've got a new book out, The Hidden History of the American Dream, and there's a chapter in it titled Make Congress Wear NASCAR Patches. And you tell this story about Lewis Powell when he was brought into the Supreme Court, when he was sworn in. Tell us that story.
Sure. So Lewis Powell was on the board of Philip Morris, and it's important to know he was on the board of Philip Morris at the time that Philip Morris was running its essentially misinformation campaign against public health advocates about the concerns about smoking and cancer. So he's in there. He's getting a lot of experience helping contribute to those misinformation, disinformation campaigns. And he gets appointed to the Supreme Court, nominated to the Supreme Court. Now, interesting side note, he had a correspondence with J. Edgar Hoover. He was sort of an informant or a source for J. Edgar Hoover in trying to root out communists, in the alleged communists in the legal profession. The FBI's report to the Senate when Powell gets nominated to the Supreme Court somehow doesn't mention the Powell memo. And the Democratic Senate had rejected 2 of Nixon's appointees. So the omission probably paved the way for Powell to get confirmed nearly unanimously. He gets confirmed, and at the send-off party, Philip Morris holds a send-off party for Lewis Powell to the Supreme Court, their board member going now to the Supreme Court. We found a record they made a record of the recording of this event, and on the cover of the record, you see a picture of the CEO of Philip Morris giving Lewis Powell an honorary judge's robe with the cigarette brands emblazoned on the robe. I mean, you cannot make this stuff up.
Yeah, it's just incredible. So what do we do about this, David, this master plan? I mean, obviously, you're doing a brilliant job of publicizing it. And Kamala Harris, Vice President Harris, has said if she gets elected president and she can get a Democratic House and Senate, job one is going to be pass the For the People Act, which will roll back much of both Bilotti and Citizens United. What are your thoughts on that, and what strategies going forward do you think that A, Democrats should be pursuing, and B, all the rest of us should know about or participate in or do whatever we can to help?
Well, the first thing is to understand that if what we're living in now is the result of a master plan by specific people with a specific agenda, it means it's not a natural inevitability. It means it actually can be rolled back if we make different decisions. So some things that are out there that can be done. The Disclose Act is in the Senate. Most Democrats, I think really all the Senate Democrats, have signed onto it. It is a bill to at least require the full, transparent disclosure of dark money spending. Right now, we're not just immersed in money, we're immersed in dark money, where we don't even know who exactly is spending it. Even in the Citizens United decision, it says such disclosure laws, the Supreme Court says such disclosure laws are constitutionally permissible. So I think, first and foremost, bring it all into the sunlight. That is a bill in the Congress, and by the way, that can be done in state legislatures and in local communities. San Francisco just did a disclosure bill. So disclosure is one thing that's sort of low-hanging fruit. To my mind, the bigger thing, the most important thing, is some form of public financing of elections. You heard Bernie Sanders talk about that at the Democratic National Convention. Public financing of elections is not a radical idea. Some states have done it. Some cities have done it. Twice in the last 30, 40 years, Congress has come very close to making it happen. The Senate passed it at one point. The Congress passed it. It was vetoed by George H.W. Bush. But the point is making sure that candidates can run for office and get resources that are not private resources that come with the expectation of legislative favors. Public financing, it's not a panacea. It doesn't fix everything. But if we can have a system that lets people run for office where they don't have to rely on that corrupting money, the money that comes with the expectation of favors, I think that can go a long way to fixing a lot of the worst parts of the current system.
Yeah. Are there any other countries that have public financing of elections?
Various countries have subsidies to parties, ways for the campaigns are shorter. Some of them have spending limits. So the answer is yes, and again, it's not a radical idea. I mean, look to Arizona, a purple state, has and had public financing of elections for a while. Cities do. Like, this is not a crazy idea. And I would say this: the argument against it is, oh, you just want to give a subsidy to politicians. And my argument is, well, we already have right now the best government that private money can buy. It's not so great right now. So I think the only way we can move with a public financing system is up into a better system.
Yeah. So the podcast is called The Master Plan. It's from levernews.com, and you can find it wherever you find fine podcasts, and more information at levernews.com. David Sirota. David, thank you so much for dropping by.
Tom, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Keep up the great work.
Thank you.
You're doing God's work here, David. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll be back with you on the other side of this break with Putin Alert and Geeky Science. Stay tuned.